in ag economics and agribusiness management. While a member of Purdue's and national contests, including the Fort Worth Stock Show and NAIL. A fourth-generation cattleman, Tyler is co-owner of Diamond Farms in Albion, Indiana.
Hello, everybody. Welcome for tuning in. This is the DeKalb County Fall Fair Dairy Breeder and Dairy Steer Show. I'm joined here by Cooper Eads and once again Claire Woodcox, Miss DeKalb County, and Sarah Reesner. Some of you might know who she is, some of you might not. And we're just going to get started here. And we will have a commentator for you. He will let you know what's going on. And then once we're ready, we'll get the pledge up there for you.
To New York. Please give a hand for our judge today, Tyler Marker. If you guys will please stand, we will do the pledges next.
I pledge allegiance I pledge my head to clear.
Supporter of youth and agriculture, and we're big advocates for agriculture as well. And we were trying to think of something new this year. What can we do down at the barns to still recognize the youth down here? We do a lot of things throughout the week, but we wanted to do something different. And this year we decided in the large animal species that we want to take a moment and recognize all the first-year 4-H members here that show dairy beef, and we have a bucket for them to use throughout hopefully most of their 4-H career. So with that said, I have Audrey Malcolm. Oh, here, come over here. There you go. I have Paisley Hepler. Paisley, if you want to stand over here for a second. I have Mariah Hartman. Oh, you can hand the cards out. I have Nicole Scoville. And then next up, I have a few other kids here. They are multi-species showmen. So they've either received their buckets already at a different show already this week, or have requested there's another show tomorrow that we'll be at as well. So those are Trixie Kellogg. I don't know if she's back there. Audrey Malcolm, or excuse me, I already said her. She's over there. Brant McCartney and Eli Patty. All right, these guys are your first-year showmen, so good luck this week, and I hope you guys have fun.
All right, before we get started here, I'd also like to thank our sponsor of the day, Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance Agent, Austin Tiernan. Please go visit him out at the tent right outside the show barn. He also has a raffle of a utility cart, which would be great for families hauling in all kinds of stuff into the fairgrounds. So go visit Austin and talk to him for a little while. We will get started here in just a moment with Class 1 of dairy feeders, lightweight dairy feeders.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Justin Hoover. I will be your voice behind the ring for today, and we're going to get started here in just a few minutes for the Dairy Feeder and Dairy Steers show.
All right, we will bring in Class 1, lightweight dairy feeders. Brant McCartney. Brock McCartney. And Brock McCartney.
Again, Justin Hoover. I am the livestock judging coach at Eastside High School with the FFA program, and Mrs. Lauren Hook. Been the livestock judging coach there now 5 years. We currently own and operate a small show meat goat operation. But being a livestock judging coach, multi-species, so no goats today. We got calves. Calves are fun, especially these feeders. Especially when it comes to the dairy feeders. So as you can tell with the dairy feeders, typically, right, it's not a beef cow, but when those mama cows, those dairy cows have babies, sometimes they'll give you a heifer and sometimes they won't. And so we turn those boys into steers, and we feed them out, we butcher them and put them into the commercial production for the beef industry. So real quick, our judge today is the graduate of Purdue University, where he earned dual degrees in ag economics and agribusiness management. While a member of Purdue's judging team, he was recognized with high overall individual and high individual in reasons at national contests, including the Fort Worth Stock Show and the North American International Livestock Exposition. If you know anything about those two shows, and especially from the livestock judging world, very competitive, and that says a lot about the individual today with Tyler. I've judged alongside Tyler before. I would put him up there with anyone when it comes to evaluating livestock, especially with the youth. He's extremely good with the youth and being able to communicate with them. He's a fourth generation cattleman. Tyler is co-owner at Diamond View Farms in Albion, Indiana, where his family's dedicated to raising and showing quality cattle at local, state, and national events. Their program has produced multiple champions, including being 3-time Indiana State Fair Grand Champion winners. Tyler serves as the show superintendent for the largest dairy beef show in the Midwest. He is passionate about working with youth in the livestock industry and values the opportunity to judge shows at all levels and species across the country, spanning Alaska to New York. Again, today our judge is Tyler Marker.
Well, as we get started here in our feeder calf show, the young man to lead us off closest to the gate is going to take the class for me. He's the stoutest made individual, and as he steps into the ring, I appreciate the length of forearm that he's working with. He's got the greatest circumference of bone as you study him comparatively to his contemporaries out here. One that's certainly, again, stouter made from the ground up. That gives us the impression that he's going to be more efficient as he continues on in his journey. As you study him from the top, he's got the most amount of spread over the top line of his rib there, out through that ribeye and loin area as well. Maybe one that you want to correct and reorganize in his loin and level him up there and give him a little more flex of spine and lengthen him up from that 13th rib there back. But one in relatively to this class is where we're going to start us off. Young man's white calf here in second is going to go ahead and come out next in the lineup. One that I appreciate is balance nose to tail. One that as you study him up top, he's wider at the point of his shoulders and in through his loin, as well as you square out of his hip. Maybe doesn't have as much stifle definition and dimension as you study him from the rear as the young man here rounding us out in third. Certainly the framiest type individual here, one that's working with a lot of air underneath him as you study him from the profile. One that we need to get him deeper into his heart, center, and flank out of his rib, and just doesn't quite have the width, natural width at his base.
Your Class 1 lightweight dairy feeder, first, Brant McCartney. Second, Brock McCartney. Third, Brock McCartney. We will now bring in Class 2 lightweight dairy feeders. Eli Patty. Kellen Carnahan. And McKenna May.
So you can see there with Tyler, he is a very well seasoned and experienced judge who is one of the few that has believe it or not, a photographic memory. So when he's going to talk to the class, a lot of times he won't even look at the animal, and he can paint a picture, which is what we want as a judge, right? To be able to paint a picture of exactly what that animal looks like, what we like about him, and what we would like to maybe tweak or change about him. So when we're looking at these feeders, some of the terms you might have heard were what we would call projection terms. So we're not judging them today like they're going to be put on the rail where they might go and be butchered, but we're going to project more of what will they grow into when they become a full-blown, ready to butcher market steer. So when we evaluate these feeders, a lot of times the evaluation focus is on assessing the animal's potential for efficient growth and meat production. And I'll kind of go through how to approach that evaluation so that as you hear Tyler talk today, you can kind of figure out what he's looking for, what some terms mean, stuff like that. So obviously frame and structural correctness are going to be some top priorities in these feeders. They're going to look at the calf skeletal framework. They're looking for a long, deep, wide body with good bone structure. The animal should have a straight top line, strong pasterns, correct leg placement when viewed from the front, the side, which we call the profile, and the rear. He's going to look for structural soundness that indicates the ability to carry weight efficiently as the
Here in our
animal
second
grows.
class, the young man to lead us off, so again, has the stoutest made individual, the squarest made out of his base as you study him up top, walks the most genuine and true of any individual in the class, and proportionally to his skeleton, when you get him at the profile, is one that has a good amount of depth out of his heart and center rib. Maybe he hollows up a bit out of that flank as you get him on the profile there. One that you'd like to widen up a little bit out of his hip, but certainly the most rugged individual of the class out here, and one that again has the most balanced frame when you study him from the side. That doesn't take away from the young lady's jersey here in second. Certainly one that you appreciate the balance nose to tail as you study him at the profile, but when you get on top of him, that's where he gets more sharper and angular over his shoulder, point of rib, as well as his hip area there. I'd like to widen him out, give him a little bit more natural flex out of his spine as you study him into motion. That's where he wants to get a little bit tight over that spine and out of that loin edge, and as he gets around the ring, kind of short strided, but certainly one that has a good amount of depth of body as you get him on the profile. And that's what gets him over the young man rounding out this particular class. One that you appreciate the levelness of top line. Doesn't just quite have the depth of center rib relative to the frame that we're working with. He's one that's a bit taller as you study him from the side. I like the length of forearm that he's working with there. Just doesn't quite have the natural width out of his base and up through the top edge of his spine to merit higher for me in this particular lineup.
Your Class 2 lightweight dairy feeder, first, Eli Patty. Second, McKenna May. Third, Kellen Carnahan.
So now we'll bring the last two classes, first and second place, in for our lightweight dairy feeder champion in reserve.
We will now bring in our first and second place from Class 1 and 2 lightweight dairy feeders. Lightweight dairy feeder, first, Brant McCartney. Class 2 winner, Eli Patty. Class 1 second, Brock McCartney. And Class 2 second, McKenna May. We will now pick our champion lightweight dairy feeder.
So again, that last class, he's talking about frame structural correctness. These calves kind of got to be built for the long haul to be able to have the most muscling and make it to the ideal weight at the end of the day, which is around 1,300 to 1,500 pounds. The next priority after frame and structure is going to be muscling and what we call body composition. Really, he's going to assess muscle development throughout the body, particularly in those high-value cuts. You know, you heard him talk about ribeye, loin, right? Those are the high-value cuts in beef. The round, the shoulder, the heart area. We want that heart to be nice, wide, and deep. That gives more room for rib cage, which is where we get our ribeye, and also lung development and the overall health of the animal. It's going to look for a thickness throughout the stifle, wide between the legs, muscle expression in that forearm, which he's already talked about. The calf should show adequate muscling for its age and weight while maintaining the leader characteristics typical of the dairy breeds. Our next priority is going to be growth and performance potential. We're going to evaluate indicators of growth capacity, which are kind of like chest width.
Well, let's celebrate these kids here in your lightweight feeder division. We've got 4 calves out here from our first and second class, and my job as a judge is to get like with like as similarly as possible as I can with what I'm given out here. And over time, as the show goes on, you'll see that I have a type, and many in the audience will likely be able to predict where the classes are going as we continue on here, because I'm very consistent in what I'm looking for. That being said, I think there's similarities here in our lightweight division, which is usually always the trickiest division to get consistency with, because we typically have a wide range of weights in here. But the way they're divided out in this particular show, we've got quite a bit of similarities in the 2 class winners out here. I spoke them in their individual classes, but let's just talk about some of their similarities briefly. Both stouter made individuals relative to the weight and age that they're working with, those that have a greater circumference of bone and bone density as you study them from the foot up through the top edge of their spine and skeleton. Ones that are a bit wider at their top line as you study them up top. They've got more width at the point of their shoulders and in through their top line as well, and they're square made out of their hip. For me, there's one out here that balances out just a little bit better out of his spine, one that's got more depth as you study him from the profile, and one that walks away a little bit naturally wider at his base. And that's what's going to go ahead and get your champion. From there, I think your reserve most neatly follows this type and kind of our champion out here. I'll get you my selections. Let's give him another round of applause.
Your lightweight dairy feeder champion is exhibited by Eli Patty.
So that's something you're going to see here with Tyler today. He's a true cattleman, and there we go.
And your reserve lightweight dairy feeder is exhibited by Brant McCartney.
In the cattle world, they like to slap the rump of that calf or steer when we select champion, reserve champion, grand. That's how you know usually if a judge is a true cattleman or not. Kind of an homage to how we used to do things and keeping that tradition alive. Come up next with Class 3, our light medium weight dairy feeders.
We will now bring in Class 3 light medium weight dairy feeders. McKenna May, Kendra Carnahan, and McKenna May.
So getting back to that growth and performance potential, he talked about it again, but we're looking for that growth capacity, that chest width, depth, which suggests lung and heart capacity. Again, we want that to kind of be big, wide, stout, so that they can grow and mature all the way to the final weight. Looking for kind of a moderate frame size appropriate for the feeding period ahead as well. The animal should appear thrifty and vigorous with bright eyes, healthy hair, which all suggest, hey, this calf is healthy and can make it the long haul till its final weight. Lastly, and what he's kind of talked about, is bounce and proportionality. When we talk bounce and proportionality, think of it like a puzzle. you want it to kind of fit the way it should. Also think of like a limousine, right? It's really long with a front engine that's kind of small and a trunk that's kind of small. Think of that when we talk about bounce for animals. That doesn't really look right on an animal. We want it to fit more like a regular car where all the pieces fit together. So we're going to kind of look and see from the front to the rear, is everything proportionate and how they develop. By that, when we split that animal in thirds, is the front third, middle third, rear third, do they all fit together evenly?
It's just our whole salad. Yeah, you're good.
We want to avoid animals that appear overdeveloped in one area at the expense of others, and so typically animals will lay on condition, finish. Finish is the word we like to use in terminal animals, and that means fat. From the front to the rear. So if they're super fat up front, super skinny in the back, we don't really want that. We want to kind of see it progress, but we want it to also somewhat be even in that fat development. But in the end, the key is identifying animals with structural foundation, with growth potential to efficiently convert that feed that we feed them into lean muscle, while keeping those dairy characteristics alive in that animal as well. So that's just kind of the priorities, what we look for in feeders. Hopefully I'll try to, if he uses some terms that sound new or not familiar, how much of that muscling is true and how deep that loin is as well. And Tyler's really good with showmanship, and you will see it multiple times today. During the show, he's going to give these kids pointers, and if you were watching, he was just telling the young lady to keep the head up on the calf. If you drop that head, it drops behind its shoulders, and it's going to look like it's got a broken spine, or it dips behind its shoulder and it's not level. So you'll see that. Hopefully all the kids pick up on that, because when it comes time for showmanship, they should know exactly what he's.
Well, in a class here that none of them quite fit your ideal type and kind, you got to break them down a bit into what really they have. And for me, the one that does the most right in this particular lineup is the young lady in purple here closest to the gate. In terms of how he balances up, when he's set head down just a bit, get a little more to their group. He's got frame and size about him, which I wish we could get him stouter. Again, I'd like them all to be stouter in this particular class. But one that just doesn't quite have the depth of body. But he does have more width over the point of his shoulders than some in this lineup. But one that needs to have his rear end reorganized there. He wants to follow behind himself, not as coordinated on the move. I think he just needs some structural correctness to merit higher for me.
Class 3, light, medium weight dairy feeders. First, McKenna May. Second, McKenna May. And third, Kendra Carnahan. We will now bring in Class 4, dairy feeders. Blake Hanshoe. Audrey Malcolm. And Rylan Weinbrenner.
So in this last class, you heard him talk about, 13th rib back. Just so you know, if you don't know, those listening, any split hoof market animal typically has 2 sets of 13 ribs. And so that 13th rib is the last one back, and that's kind of what he's talking about when we talk about Springer rib. We want that rib nice and round. So if you're a fisherman, think of it this way. Think of a bluegill and how they're kind of tall but narrow, and think of a catfish and how round they are. We want these livestock animals to be more looking like a catfish, because there's going to be more muscling and more meat. Think of the difference between catfish and bluegill and how much meat there is, right? On a catfish, there's a lot more than a bluegill. So when he's talking about rib and spring of rib, boldness of rib, that's what we're kind of talking about. Stoutness, when he says stout, we're talking about bone circumference, bone size. We want them nice, stout, and big, so that we know when they get to that final weight, they can carry that weight all the way through. And lastly, the air underneath the calf. What we're talking about is the height of the calf. if you think of dogs, right, if you've ever seen a standard poodle, they're kind of tall off the ground versus like a bulldog who's really short to the ground. We like them a little taller off the ground so that they can carry that weight a little more easily. If you think of a bulldog and how long it can run, it can't run really long or really far, right? He's so muscular, so bold and massive and short to the ground, his stride's really short. Versus that standard poodle, kind of a bigger, taller frame dog, more athletic looking. Those dogs can go forever. And you'll see the judge kind of put him on the move. He likes to evaluate livestock on the move like myself. When you get these livestock on the move, you can really see any issues with structure. You can see the muscling as they move versus when they're standing still. And so a lot of times you'll see judges kind of circle them. They want to see them move. It's just a little easier to evaluate them. You'll notice also a lot of these exhibitors will have a show stick. And think of that like a tool, right? These animals are kind of big. And the last thing we want to do is try to move feet and legs and position them with our hands just because they're so big. And we don't want them to kick us either. And so that show stick they're using, again, it's a tool. You can set up the feet, make sure they're nice and square. One thing you'll notice is on the show side or the profile side that is showing to the judge, we want that back foot backwards. And the reason for that is we want to see that animal kind of pop its muscles so that we can kind of see full muscle development in that rear hip. And you can use the show stick to move that back foot. And also that show stick, let's say your calf might pop its tail head up a little bit or its back. You can take that show stick and kind of touch him up on his back and make that level out. Or you can scratch his belly and make his back pop up too. So multiple uses for that show stick.
Logical first place for me in this particular lineup with the young man's white calf out here. As you get him up top, he's the most robust topped individual of this class. He's widest over the point of his shoulders, widest out of his forerib as well. He's nice and wide out of his chest floor, and that leads himself into an more open body wall. As you get on top of him, you're not disappointed in terms of width that he's carrying up through that loin edge, and he's squarely made out of his hip, has the most dimension out of his stifle of any calf in the particular group. At this weight, they certainly should be getting there, and is the stouter made individual of this particular class. Again, a logical place for us to start. That doesn't take away from the young lady here in second who's doing a nice job about getting her calf presented. Certainly the stylish individual of the group. I think he's the most eye-catching and appealing calf. From that perspective, I like the way his head and neck blend into the angle of his shoulder as you study him from the front 1/3. He's a calf that's got a good amount of length of forearm and width out of his chest floor, one that's nice and long out of his loin as well, but doesn't quite have the depth in his center rib and flank as I'd like to see, and doesn't quite have the width up top as the calf ahead of him. And then the young lady's Jersey calf rounding out this class is certainly one that's got some poundage advantage in this particular lineup, but in terms of his skeleton organization there, as you study him from the rear quarter and he gets out on the move, we need more flex out of that spine, more levelness out of that hip, lay his tail head down a bit there, and that's see him more coordinated on the move, but he's certainly working with a good amount of weight comparatively to the others in the class.
Your Class 4 light medium weight, first place, Blake Hanshoe. Second, Rylan Weinbrenner. And third, Audrey Malcolm. We will now bring in the first and second from Class 3 and 4 for your light medium weight dairy feeder champion and reserve. We have McKenna May. Blake Hanshoe. McKenna May. And Rylan Weinbrenner.
So So in that last class, Tyler talked about dimension out of the stifle, and what he's talking about there is when you look at them from the rear view, think of a 2D picture, right? If you see a picture on a piece of paper, it's there, but you can't kind of see expression in the details. So if you see something in 3D, where you can look behind them and see how much muscle pops, that's what we're looking for. And that's where we get to squareness out of the back as well. So we want that rump to be square all the way down from the top of the tail head where the pins are down to the rump, and that stifle is just above that hock area, and we want that to be nice and square.
Let's go ahead and give all these young exhibitors a well-deserved round of applause. As they get lined up out here, your champion's going to be the one that has the most circumference of bone, is the stoutest made and widest up top, one that's got the most dimension out of his stifle as you study him from the rear. Certainly is the powerhouse in this particular lineup and relative to where he's at in his sense of maturity. Your reserve is going to go ahead and be one that's very eye-appealing, one that's very well balanced nose to tail, but tends to give up just a little bit of width and robustness at the top edge of his skeleton. But in terms of how he balances out nose to tail, he's certainly rivals our champion out here. With that being said, I'll get you my favorites. Let's give him another hand.
Your champion light medium weight dairy feeder is exhibited by Blake Hanshoe. And your reserve champion is exhibited by Rylan Weinbrenner.
So we also talked about depth of flank, and when we move from that front shoulder where we're talking about the heart at the front, we want the flank and everything to kind of not go up and be pinched, but we want it nice and level all the way through. If anything, we want that flank to maybe be a little deeper, right? We've all heard of flank steak before, and so we want that flank to be nice and deep, and we want that levelness underneath. So that's what depth of flank, what we're looking for.
We will now bring in Class 5 medium weight dairy feeders. Emily Scoville, Kendra Carnahan, and Caden Brown.
All right. Class 5 medium weight dairy feeders. These are going to range from 437 pounds to 443 pounds. So a nice tight weight spread. As we get in these larger divisions, you'll see that weight spread kind of get a little tight. As we move along, though, you'll see that weight spread get tighter and tighter. And that's where he talked about being consistent in what he chooses. It's a little bit easier as a livestock evaluator when the weight is a little bit closer to be able to choose which one is which. So in the dairy feeder classes, these calves have to be full-blood dairy. Mixed with the Ayrshire, it's going to be a full-blood calf. We will have a cross division later on where it could be influenced by another dairy breed or even a beef breed. And remember, these dairy breeds, when we breed them, we're not breeding for muscling. What we're breeding for is milk production. And so if you watch the beef show tonight at 4, you'll see a big difference between the two. Again, it's just like any other species that's primarily for milk versus meat. In livestock judging, when we teach our kids structure, we love to use dairy animals because in the dairy world, no matter if it's a goat, even sheep over in England, and cattle, they have to be structurally sound to be able to make it the long haul to produce milk. The last thing a producer wants is a cow he's got to kind of baby and help along to be able to feed and produce milk.
Well, an interesting batch of calves out here in this particular lineup. No individual's quite like the other, but for me, the one that does the most right and stands out from the crowd is the young lady's red calf out here. Certainly the smoothest made, most robust in terms of his center body. He's the widest up top as you get on top of him there and comparing to his contemporaries out here. One that's working with certainly the most amount of stifle definition and dimension and expressiveness out of his rear quarter, but he's not one without his faults. He's one that tends to be a little bit tight in his sternum, causing him to be a little bit roached over that loin. We need to free him up and level him out of his hip bit more, because as you study him from the side, he wants to round out of that hip. But in terms of what he does correctly, he's certainly the powerhouse calf of the bunch, and he rightfully deserves his place at the top. The young lady, or the young man here next and second, is one I think in terms of type and kind most neatly follows our class winner. He's long-bodied. He's wider over his top line than some of those behind him here. One that's certainly got a good density of bone, and he's going to be a big calf when he gets to his finished weight. One that you want to clean up into his front 1/3, lay him back in the angle of his shoulder a bit, and give him more robustness and width out of his center rib. I think that'd see him more competitive in this particular lineup. The young lady's stouter made black calf out here in third is one that I like how he balances nose to tail at the profile. Very eye appealing. Certainly the black is helping him out here in terms of how expressive he looks in his rear quarter, but one that's not as naturally made wide, one that doesn't quite have the width and robustness through his center rib to merit higher for me. And then the young man's framier black calf out here to round out this class is one that is reading a little uncoordinated, less athletic than some of those ahead of him there. One that we need to level out his hip, lay his tail head down in him, and give him more depth of center rib, and that'd see him more competitive.
Class 5 medium weight dairy feeders. First, Emily Scoville. Second, Caden Brown. Third, Madison Scoville. Fourth, Kendra Carnahan. We will now bring in our Class 6 medium weight dairy feeders. Owen Brown. Luke Berryhill. And Hazen Foster. Just a reminder, the destinations are on the back wall of the show barn over by the main door. Those need to be checked by 4:30 today. If they are not checked by 4:30 today, if they need changed, you will not be able to do so. So make sure that those are correct by today at 4:30. Also, we have the 2025 Miss DeKalb County here, Clay Woodcox. If you guys could all give her a hand. She will be helping Charlotte pass out some ribbons.
All right, so in that last class, he talked about the first place animal there being a little bit roached loin, and by that we mean think of a pyramid or a triangle, and his loin kind of comes to a peak. We want that loin nice and flat, and typically that comes from some type of structural issue. Maybe the shoulder isn't set back far enough, maybe it's too far forward, or maybe the pins in the back of the animal are dropped too far. And so that's where that kind of roached back typically comes from. When he talks about being athletic, what we're talking about there is think of a Olympic athlete on track and field, how when you look at them, you're like, hey, that's probably a 100-meter dash runner, versus someone like me, you would probably be like, yeah, you're not an Olympic athlete. And so when we talk about animals and athletic, we want them to be muscular. We want that muscle to pop. We want all the pieces to fit from a structural standpoint to a performance, growth, muscling standpoint. So when he says something is athletic, that's a very good compliment to get.
here in our next class. The young man to lead us off is one that, again, is stouter made. I like the length of body that he's working with there. Maybe he's not as deep in his center rib as the calf beside him out here, but as you get on top of him, he's the smoothest and widest and most robust made out of his center body and point of shoulder. He's nice and square out of his hip. One that isn't without his faults. Again, I like to blend his neck into the point of his shoulder a little bit smoother, give him a little bit more flex out of his spine so he can really get out and stride a little bit more comfortable when set into motion there, and of course get him a little bit more deep into that center body, but certainly is the calf here with the most amount of natural width and ability. I like the width of chest floor that he's got and the length of forearm that he's working with. That doesn't take away from the young man here in second, is one that reads a little bit more robust. He's going to be a bit bigger framed, kind of a calf as he gets it to his finish weight. I like the depth of body that he's working with and the boldness that he has at his profile. I really like as well the squareness that he's got out of his hip, but one that just as you get on top of him, he's more sharper and angular out of the point of his shoulder as well as down through his center body. I like to give him more natural width and ability there. And then the young man to round out this particular class is one that's leaning into his dairy heritage out here, one that just doesn't read quite as masculine, doesn't read as robust and genuine and true of a market type calf. He's one that's narrowest made at his base. We need to smooth him out from the point of his neck, blending into his shoulder there, give him a little bit more depth out of that spine as well, and give him more flex and hydration and boldness out of that center rib to merit higher for me.
All right, your Class 6 medium weight dairy feeders. First, Hazen Foster. Second, Luke Berryhill. And third, Owen Brown. We will now bring in your first and second from Class 5 and 6 for your medium weight dairy feeder champion and reserve. We have Emily Scoville, Hazen Foster, Caden Brown, and Luke Berryhill.
Let's go ahead and congratulate these young people out here. In terms of what we're working with in our two first place class winners out here, I think we've got the most sense of consistency we've had thus far between the class winners in the show thus far. One that, again, your champion's going to be the one that certainly has the most amount of width over his top line and in through his loin eye area as well. One that's the most robust out of his center body and has the most dimension out of his rear quarter. Again, that one that reads a little bit more stiff and rounder out of his hip, but certainly one that's the powerhouse in this particular lineup. Your reserve is going to be the one that most neatly follows him in terms of type and kind. Maybe not as robust out of his center body and his chest floor as our champion out here, but one that certainly, if fed well and continued on a sophisticated feeding program, could certainly rival our champion in time. Let's go ahead and give him a round of applause again. I'll get you my favorites.
Your medium weight dairy feeder champion is exhibited by Emily Scoville, and your reserve, Hazen Foster. All right, we will bring in Class 7 heavy medium weight dairy feeders. Finn Lance, Wyatt Moeller, and Claire Swigart.
right, so we're in Class 7 medium heavyweight dairy feeder. I'll give a shout out to Claire Swigert. She's on our livestock judging team, and she was a 7th grader last year, and as a junior in the junior division, Beef Congress, her first ever livestock judging competition, she placed 8th overall. She did not grow up on a farm, has no experience in livestock, but has the passion for it, love for it, and just a shout out to her and her family for all their hard work with their calf, their 4-H projects, and being on the livestock judging team as well.
Once again, our sponsor of the day today is Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance agent Austin Tiernan. Go visit him outside in his booth. He's got a nice raffle for you. He also donated the champion and reserve champion prizes for today's show. So go visit him and sign up for a raffle and get some free goodies.
Well, a logical place for us to start in this particular class with the young lady's calf out here certainly is the one, as he walks into the ring, he's the widest out of his chest floor. He's got the most circumference of bone as you study him from the surface there up. And as he works around the ring, I like the way he has that traction and depth of carriage there as he gets around the ring. He reads the most athletic of any calf in this particular lineup. Comparatively, he is the stoutest mate in this group. I would not consider him to be a stout calf. But one that certainly is working with an advantage of being a shorter framed individual, which is equating to him having more appearance of width and mass. Again, if they're shorter made, that poundage and feed that we're putting in him can go to width rather than trying to fill in a taller frame. Certainly is one that's the squarest and widest made over his top line and out of his hip, and he has the most dimension and expressiveness out of his lower rear stifle as you study him from the rear. The young man coming out here in second is one that's certainly bold out of his center body with a good amount of depth that he's working with as you study him from the profile, and one that's nice and balanced down his top line. I like the levelness that he's carrying from the shoulder there back, one that just doesn't quite have the depth stoutness of frame and width that I'm looking for over his top line. He needs to read a little bit more genuine and true from his base working there up. And then the young man to round out this particular lineup is one that's very feminine in his overall makeup, one that's nice and clean out of his front 1/3, but again is one that doesn't quite have the strength and ruggedness that we're needing here in these market animals. And again, he needs to flex out a little bit better out of his loin edge there. He's working it up as you get him set into motion.
Class 7, first, Claire Swigart. Second, Finn Lance. Third, Wyatt Moeller. We will now bring in Class 8, heavy medium weight dairy feeders. Mariah Hartman, Burke Lance, and Hazen Foster.
As we get him lined up here, the young man's red cap is going to go ahead and lead us off in this particular class. He's the one that has the most smoothness from his point of shoulder there back, the most expressive and dimensional out of his stifle as you study him from the rear. One, though, that again, from a skeletal perspective, he's a bit disjointed of a calf. As you study him into motion, he's going to be one of those calves that as he continues to put on weight, he's going to look like he's two separate individuals out there. The rear is going to follow the front. We need him to collect up a little bit more out of the center portion of his skeleton. That's see him more competitive, and I'd just like to see him a little bit cleaner out of his front 1/3. I think that'd see this particular calf even more powerful in this particular lineup. Young lady coming out here next is one that's just a little bit more plainly designed, but in terms of his stoutness of frame and the width that he's working with, I think he's proportional to his skeletal design out here. One that doesn't quite have certainly the width and smoothness of our class winner as you get on top of him and beside of him. One that you want to give a little bit more depth to that center rib as well to proportionalize that width and height that he's working with there, but is one that is the second most expressive in this particular lineup. And then the young man rounding out this individual class out here is one that just, again, reads more into his dairy heritage, one that we need to smooth out from his neck into the point of his shoulder, give him more width up top, more boldness out of his center body, more squareness out of his hip, and just more natural and genuine width from his base there up to merit higher for me in this class.
Your Class 8 heavy medium weight dairy feeder was exhibited by Hazen Foster. Second, Mariah Hartman. Third, Burke Lance. We will now bring in the first and second from Class 7 and 8 for your heavy medium weight dairy champion and reserve champion. We have Claire Swigart, Hazen Foster, Finn Lance, and Mariah Hartman.
All right, we've got the heavy medium weight feeders out here. Weight range from 487 to 538, so again, a little tighter. Hazen, who had the champion Class 8, he is a young man that goes to Eastside as well. His dad is the principal, and he loves 4-H. Last year he showed feeders, and this year he talked his dad into doing sheep as well, and he's really trying. So if you see Mr. Ori Foster, the principal of Eastside High School, try to convince him to let Hazen show pigs next year so we can see Mr. Ori Foster go a little more crazy with more species at his house. Not that I condone that, but it's suggested.
Let's celebrate these kids out here in this particular drive. Very well in this particular lineup. In no particular order, the young lady's black of the calves in this particular lineup. I like the angle of his shoulder. Maybe just bring it back ever so slightly to blend into his body wall a little bit smoother. And one that, as you study him from the side, you really his center body and flank to balance him out a little bit better. But in time, that's very achievable through feed. But in time, that's certainly going to be a very good calf. And then the young man out here that's got the red calf out here. One that just, again, really smooth out of his center portion of his body, really bold out of his ribs, square out of his hip. One that's got the most amount of smoothness and dimension out of his rear quarter. One that, again, though, from a skeletal design, maybe he's not as dense in his bone design as he should be relative to the amount of mass that he's working with there. We want to clean him up in his front 1/3 ever so slightly. And again, he's one of those calves that's going to kind of follow behind him as he continues on in his journey. But he is certainly the widest made, squarest made calf of the group. That being said, I'll get you my favorites for where they stand today, and very good job on all these exhibitors for projects in next year. Let's give them a hand.
Your heavy medium weight dairy feeder champion is exhibited by Hazen Foster. And your reserve champion, Claire Swigart. We will now bring in Class 9 heavyweight dairy feeders. Kirsten Haynes, Bay Lance, and Avery Wilson.
Here in this class, I think we need a few more miles on the halter at home to get these calves a little bit more cooperative out here for these young people. But for me, the individual that wins this class is the most balanced, the most structurally and skeletally correct individual of this particular group, the young lady here to lead us off. The way he blends from his front end, I love the cleanliness that he has from his front 1/3, blends beautifully from his neck into his shoulder, lays that shoulder back at the ideal angle into his body wall out there. And as you study him from the side, you're just not disappointed with how well he balances nose to tail. He's the most collected individual of the group, the most coordinated when set into motion. Is he the most robust out of his center body? Is he the most muscular? No, he's not. But as you study him from a skeletal integrity perspective, this calf is an easy win for me in my mind. That doesn't take away from the young lady here in second. I appreciate and respect the amount of feed and consistency that goes into feeding this calf to get him as robust and square and wide that he is. He's the most dimensional out of his stifle. But as you study him from when he gets set into motion and you look at him from a skeletal design, he's got some issues out there. We want to give him more depth of flank, more depth of center rib, level him out of his hip, give him a little more flex of his spine, free him up in his sternum so he can really get out and stride a little bit better. Is one that, again, certainly the powerhouse of the group, but just doesn't quite have the correctness that I'm looking for to merit higher. And then the young lady to round out this particular class is one that's certainly deep-bodied as you get on the profile of him, but one that's the narrowest made. He doesn't have the width and the strength and the power and the stoutness to merit higher for me against his contemporaries ahead of him.
Your Class 9 heavyweight dairy feeders. First, Kirsten Haynes. Second, Avery Wilson. Third, Bay Lance. We will now bring in Class 10 heavyweight dairy feeders. Avery Wilson. Kayleigh Garton. Hazen Foster. Graydon Pepple. And Graydon Pepple.
Well, certainly the most consistent and deepest class of the show, and that's to be expected usually as we get into our heavier weights. You can see where the young people and their families focus their energy on the heavier calves. But I would challenge those individuals on the lighter end of the show here. You can certainly have your calves at the 200, 300, 400-pound weights looking just as robust and expressive as the calves are out here in this particular lineup. The young man to lead us off, the white calf out here, is certainly the most complete individual of this class. The way that he balances, I love his front 1/3, the head and neck, and the way he blends that into his shoulder blade, and the way that shoulder blade lays into a more open body wall. Really robust out of his center, wide up top, very expressive out of his rear quarter, and one that's got more depth of body as you study him from the side. And as he gets set into motion, he collects himself up and tracks out with a bit more robustness and meaning and athleticism than the young man here in second. Again, a calf that's kind of a no-neck type of a calf, one that you just kind of need to nose him out a little bit at the profile. That'll stretch that neck out. That'll lay that shoulder blade in a little bit better. One that's maybe not as robust and wide as he strides away from you there. I like him wider set at the hock as he gets behind you. But one that certainly is rivaling our class winner out here in terms of width that he's working with up top, but maybe one that just doesn't balance out and collect up as nicely. The young lady here in third is a calf you really, really like from a skeletal perspective. Really dense out of his bone, a lot of circumference from the foot up. He's a big-footed, stout-boned, rugged kind of a calf. One that you like the width that he's working with there up top. One that's really bold out of his shoulder and powerful in his center body and very square out of his hip. But one that just reads a little bit more coarse. Had he been fed a little bit better, pushed a little bit harder, smoothed out a bit, I think you'd see him further up this lineup here because he certainly has the bones to do it. The young man coming out here next in this class is one that's just a little bit plainer designed. There's a lot of muscle and a lot of power and stoutness and width on the top end of this class. And so that's a lot to compete with for this young man, but he's got more smoothness of body there. He's got more depth out of that center rib as you study him from the side than the young lady to round out this class. One that, again, is no slouch. I think you put him in another class, he'd be at the top end of that class. One that certainly is level out of his top line, square out of his hip. He's got a good amount of dimension and expressiveness out of his stifle as you study him from the side, but one that's a bit tighter in his chest, tighter in his forerib, and narrower made at his base as you get him up top and study him from the surface there up.
Your Class 10 heavyweight dairy feeders first, Graydon Pepple. Second, Graydon Pepple. Third, Avery Wilson. Fourth, Hazen Foster. Fifth, Kayleigh Garten. We will now bring in the first seconds of Class 9 and 10 for your heavyweight dairy feeder champion and reserve. Kirsten Haynes, Graydon Pepple, Avery Wilson, yes, and Graydon Pepple.
All right, our heavyweight dairy feeder champion reserve, weight ranging from 555 to 649, so about a 100-pound difference. And when you look at them out there between the first class, second class, you can kind of see the difference in weight going on as well. Usually with those heavier animals, they're going to look a little more filled out, a little more dimensional and complete, where you're not maybe seeing some bones, and they kind of just fill in each other, especially in that middle 1/3, just a lot better. Especially with cover and fat, you'll kind of see that on the ribs as well. You'll see that chest on the, if you get a front view, a little bit more deep with some dimension and actual expression in there as well.
Well, let's congratulate all of these exhibitors out here in your heavyweight drive. I don't say this often, and when I do, I genuinely mean it. There is a calf out here that I would be proud to have under our name and proud to have our showman on in terms of how he balances, the muscle that he has, the width that he's carrying, and just the expressiveness. I think he's a calf that really sets the project forward. We need to move away from the tall, lean dairy calves that we kind of have that stigma about. These cattle certainly can be fed against their genetics to be robust, muscular, and productive cattle. And we'll talk about this a bit more in our market classes and show, but dairy beef make up 25% of all consumed beef in the country. That's more than any one individual beef breed out there. That's a USDA statistic. You can take that to the bank. So these cattle are market cattle, and that's what we need to do. We have the challenge, though, of working against the genetics, and we can feed that out. It takes a really sophisticated feeding program. It's taken my family about 60 years to figure it out, but we got it done. And I think our champion certainly is well on his way. The way he balances out is just beautiful. He's a really elegant calf. He combines both show ring presence as well as that marketability that we're working with. And then as we evaluate for your reserve, it gets a bit tighter. There's one that's certainly very similar in type and kind to our class winner from a muscle perspective. And then there's one that's more like our champion from a skeletal perspective, a balance perspective. And that's, at the end of the day, structure is what we need. We can always feed in the product. We can always feed in the muscle if we know what we're doing, but we need the bones to do it. And so that being said, I'll get you my favorites out here. Let's give these young people out here a well-deserved round of applause.
Your heavyweight dairy feeder champion is exhibited by Graydon Pepple.
And for a dairy feeder, that thing is pretty complete. You look at that one, stifle all the way up. That's a pretty
Your
nice
heavyweight
feeder.
dairy feeder reserve champion is exhibited by Kirsten Haynes.
Kirsten Haynes with the reserve champion, also a past livestock judging student of mine, pursuing a degree in agribusiness at Purdue right now, and I believe this is her 10th year, and she is showing every species this year. So kudos to her and her mom, because while she's at college, somebody's got to help out.
All right, we will bring in our champions to pick our dairy feeder grand champion reserve, 3rd and 4th overall. Lightweight dairy feeder, Eli Patty. Light medium weight dairy feeder, Blake Hanshoe. Medium weight dairy feeder, Emily Scoville. Heavy medium weight dairy feeder, Hazen Foster. And heavyweight dairy feeder, Graydon Pepple. We will have the reserves on deck to pull in.
Well, please join me in congratulating all of your exhibitors out here in your feeder grand drive. Whether we're at a jackpot, a county fair, or a state fair, or even a junior nationals, to be in a grand drive is certainly a privilege and something to take with a lot of blessing that you're able to have worked this hard. My job as a judge is simply to evaluate the animals and recognize the hard work that's gone in months and months in advance to this show. This is one day. All of your hard work, all of those hours are paying off into one moment. And truthfully, the gig of it all is that you're really working for about a 5-second impression at the end of the day. A lot of judges, especially those of us who judge all over the country and we're judging constantly, for the most part, we've got them placed as soon as they walk into the ring. We certainly want to study them and make sure we're correct in what we're looking for out here, but you're really working for that first 5-second impression. So let's just put that into perspective for a second there. Months and months, sometimes since January, depending on the age of the calf that we're working with, you have put in all that work for just a brief moment to be recognized out here. And I see all of your hard work in this lineup. So let's give them a well-deserved round of applause for the work that they put in. And not just our young people out here. Let's have a round of applause for the families, the cousins, the helpers, the friends that are responsible for getting these kids inside the arena. Please, let's have a well-deserved round of applause. It does take a village. And certainly, you know, we're evaluating the cattle out here, and there's a lot to appreciate and talk, and we've done that throughout the show, but really what we're raising out here are the exhibitors. The lessons that you've learned to get here, you have now learned how to become a champion. I want you to take that same drive, that same level of consistency that you have to put in. If you put that same heart, that same drive, that same level of consistency in everything you do, you will be champions in the game of life. Every time, I promise you that, 100%. And not always can we be champions in the game of life, but I promise you when you stumble, when you fumble, because it will happen, your army, your village, these people on the outside of the ring, we will catch you every time and get you back on your feet so that you can keep going every single time. That is an absolute fact. This is your army. This is your village, and I want you to take a moment and just appreciate all those out here who are responsible for getting you in. That being said, I think there's one out here that just is a notch above the rest, is one that, again, would be super proud to have under our program. I think he's one that just balances out beautifully. He combines that show ring appeal and presence from his front 1/3 all the way back. He doesn't give you a bad look, but yet he's still market forward. He's robust, he's wide, he's expressive, he's dimensional out of his rear quarter. He's one that still tracks out beautifully, one that has longevity about him. He's not just a good feeder calf. He's one that if cared for well, he'll go on and be a very good market calf as well with the balance and frame that he's working with because he has the skeletal correctness and integrity about him. And that being said, then we'll reevaluate with a reserve from that division for your top 4 thereafter. I'll put the mic down after that and just get you my favorites in the way in the order that I sort them. Let's give them another well-deserved round of applause on a job well done.
Your grand champion dairy feeders exhibited by Graydon Pepple. We will now bring in the reserve, Kirsten Haynes.
Congratulations to Graydon there. Fantastic calf, well complete for being a dairy calf. That thing is at 12 o'clock. It is very, very nice, and the judge there, Tyler, hit all the high points as well. And after that decision, there's going to be some decisions to be made because there's some pieces out here that are ideal for what we're looking for, but you just kind of got to find the priorities and which one fits that puzzle piece the best.
Your reserve grand champion is exhibited by Kirsten Haynes. Your 3rd overall is exhibited by Emily Scoville. We will bring in the reserve from Emily's class, Hazen Foster.
our judge giving our lightweight feeder exhibitor some confidence, letting them know it's not the first time a calf's ever laid down, and that's true. Just words of encouragement to keep working, and he's definitely doing it.
And your 4th overall is exhibited by Hazen Foster. We will bring in dairy cross feeders, class 11 lightweight dairy cross here shortly. I want to go ahead and introduce our judge for today. Once again, Tyler Marker is a graduate of Purdue University, where he earned dual degrees in Ag Economics and Agribusiness Management, while a member of Purdue's judging team. He was recognized with high overall individual and high individual in reasons and national contests, including Fort Worth Stock Show and NAIL. A 4th-generation cattleman, Tyler is co-owner of Diamond View Farms in Albion, Indiana, where his family is dedicated to raising and showing quality cattle at local, state, and national levels. Their program has produced multiple champions, including being a 3-time Indiana State Fair champion winners, grand champion winners. Tyler serves as the show superintendent for the largest dairy beef show in the Midwest. He is passionate about working with youth in livestock industry and values the opportunity judging shows at all levels, species across the country, including spanning from Alaska to New York. Once again, if we could give a round of applause to Tyler Marker. We have brought in our class 11 lightweight cross feeders. We have Devin Berryhill, Taylor Hanshoe, Devin Berryhill, and Rylan Weinbrenner.
All right, so for our class 11 lightweight dairy feeders, weight ranges of 328 to 400. And these can be crossed with another dairy breed or a beef breed, and you can see the beef influence out here, calf there. Nothing changes on the evaluation process, so they're going to evaluate them just like the dairy feeders. We're looking for growth, performance. What can this animal be, and what does it project to be in the future? If we had a crystal ball to figure out which one would be the best, that'd be great. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So we do the best we can when we try to figure out which one we think will project to be the best calf at the end of the day when we hit that target market weight.
Want to remind parents and 4-Hers again that destinations need to be in by 4:30 today. The list is on the back wall. Double check it. If it is incorrect, please let Effie know in the 4-H office. Those need to be looked over by 4:30 today to be changed.
Speckled's going to go first with it looks like the belted in second.
Well, as we begin our crossbreed division out here, the young man speckled calf is going to go ahead and lead us off in our lightweight class here. He's certainly the stoutest and boldest made individual. He's got the most circumference of bone. He's big-footed. He's stout-boned as you study him all the way through his skeletal design. One that I like the angle of his shoulder blending into a more open forerib. It was one that collects up better from his loin edge as well as you study him into motion. Is one that's more athletic and collected and coordinated when set on the move there. And as you get behind him, he's very proportionally square out of his hip as well. As you get behind him there, a logical place to start us off. The young lady's red belted calf and coming in second is one that you appreciate the smoothness that he's working with as you study him from the side. He's one that wants to get a little far forward in the angle of his shoulder. One that we'd like to lay him back, lay that shoulder back into his body wall a little bit better, and one that needs to collect up better through his loin edge is one that tends to, again, his rear kind of follows him there, and one that's just maybe not as robust and dense in his bone design, but is one from a smoothness perspective and a width up top perspective, one that most neatly follows our class winner. The young man coming out here in third is one, there's a little bit of debate in my mind over these two, but for me, the young man has more circumference of bone, more depth of body as you study him from the side. He's deeper out of his flank. He's one that's got a little bit more natural boldness and stretch out of his center body. One that maybe doesn't level out of his hip as nicely, wants to round out of that pin set ever so slightly as you study him from the side, and that's where the young lady here has an advantage. Certainly a square hipped kind of a calf, but one that's not as neatly and widely made as you study him from the ground up. We want to give him more robustness and power out of that chest floor and shoulder, one that just needs to be a little bit more robust out of his center body as well to merit higher forming.
Your lightweight dairy crossfeeder champion is exhibited by Devin Berryhill. Reserve, Rylan Weinbrenner. Third, Devin Berryhill. And fourth, Taylor Handshoe. We will now do class 12 medium weight dairy crossfeeders. The winner and second will also be the champion and reserve of this class. We have Nicole Scoville, Connor Cottrell, Brody McCartney, Emily McLean, and Emily McLean.
So in that last class, the judge talked about forward and the angle of the shoulder. And for those of you that kind of don't know what he's talking about is right where that neck meets that the top line. That's the point of the shoulder up high. And then if you look at the front shoulder blade towards the front going to the chest, what we want to do is rock that back. So that should be a perfect 45-degree angle going from top of neck to the chest, then chest back to the point of elbow. And we want those all to be perfect 45s. And if we rock that shoulder back ever so slightly, we'll get a little bit higher head carriage. So if you see a calf walking who kind of keeps his head down, typically that's intuitive of a shoulder being too far forward. If we can rock that back, structurally you're going to get a better animal who can reach down, eat, carry the weight, get to the feed bunk, get to the water, and potentially not have any structural issues. In the livestock judging world, we love angles, and we like them all to be 45 or 90 in some way, shape, or form. That's something that's tough for the kids to learn is structure and angles, and it's because we can't take rulers and protractors out on animals to be able to show them exactly, okay, yep, this one's angle's better, this one's not. So what we like to do in our livestock judging team is we raise show goats, so we bring them over. We put them up on a stand, and I get sidewalk chalk, and they draw all over them. All right, let's draw the structure out, and then let's pick it out. And so that way, all the kids can kind of really get their hands on and see what is correct, what is not correct. And then they get a bath to get all that chalk off, because lo and behold, sometimes we get a little crazy with the chalk when we're judging. But that is a really good way to learn structure, to see structure, is to draw it on the animal. And structure on every animal's darn near the same. So even if we're talking cattle, pigs, sheep, goats, it can be a little different in how it's put together on the animal, but in the end, we kind of all want the same thing in each animal.
Well, as we get them lined up here in your medium weight division, crossbreds, the young lady to lead us off is the logical starter for me. Again, the circumference and density of bone. I love the length of arm that he's working with and the width that he has out of his chest floor. It certainly was a precursor to what he's working with there back. Really robust, centered, bold out of his center body and rib. One that's nice and square out of his hip with a lot of dimension, kind of a big-ended type of a steer. One that you'd like to lengthen him up, though, as you study him from the profile from that 13th rib back. Just give him a little more stretch of loin, but again, that's a really good calf to lead us off here. Very robust and masculine type of a calf. Young man's all black calf to come out here in second is one that I think most neatly follows in type and kind in terms of stoutness. He doesn't quite have the density or robustness of bone or the boldness out of his shoulder of our class winner, but is one that certainly as you get on top of him, he's moderate in the terms of type of width that he's got at the point of his shoulder down through his center body and his squareness out of his hip. Just one that, again, we need to give him more density of bone, more boldness and power out of his chest floor and center body. I think that'd see him more competitive. The young man's red calf coming out here in third is one that just a little bit tighter and shallower made in his center body as you get on the side of him there, but is one that's got more dimension and expressiveness out of his rear quarter, is one that's just a bit smoother made from the shoulder blending there back, but one that we need to give him a little more flex out of his spine. The young lady rounding out this particular class is certainly the framiest individual of the group, leaning into the dairy side of things a little bit here, but is one that just doesn't quite have the coordination as he walks away from it. He wants to kind of cross those rear legs, really narrowly made. One that you appreciate the depth of body that he's working with, but just doesn't have the width and power to merit higher for me.
Your medium weight dairy cross feeder is exhibited by, your champion is exhibited by Emily McLean. Reserve champion, Brody McCartney. Third in class, Connor Cottrell. And fourth, Nicole Scoville. We will now bring in the heavyweight dairy cross feeders for your champion and reserve. We have Brennan McCartney, Luke Scoville, Paisley Hepler, and Brennan McCartney.
Fantastic. So now we are on our heavyweight dairy cross feeders ranging from weight of 473 to 532 pounds. We will, with this one class, select a champion and reserve champion heavyweight dairy cross feeder. Then we'll bring back the champions, reserve champions from the last three classes, and we will select our great dairy cross feeders. So the judge in the last class talked about precursor of a long forearm that's dimensional, and that's that front leg from the knee kind of up. And it's a precursor in a lot of livestock if they have a really long, thick, and meaty forearm, that will transition throughout the entire animal. When we go to select livestock and they're young and not really developed, that's something we look at along with the cannon bone to see how much circumference of bone, how much dimension, width, and length that forearm is to show us, hey, when he grows to be bigger, if that's already big now, it's just going to continue to get bigger.
Well, here in our top pair of black cattle, the young man to lead us off is one that just works with more width of chest floor, more density and circumference of bone. As you study him from the surface there up, as you get on top of him, he's bolder out of his shoulder, wider out of his top rib, and one that's just got more dimension and expressiveness out of his hip. One that I think stands on a bit squarer made set of feet and legs as well. When you get him at the standstill and set into motion, noting the young man here in second, we just want to square those toes up. We need to get that heel deeper, square him in out of those toes so we can flex out and move out a little bit more forward and drive out. One that has kind of a no neck kind of a calf. We want to give him more stretch out of that front 1/3, but he's certainly the second most smooth blending individual of the class. I'd like to see him a bit wider up top in order to merit higher against our class winner, but one that's still got a good amount of expressiveness in his rear quarter as you study him from behind. The young man's goggle-eyed calf to come out here in third is one that certainly has a bit more depth of body as you study him from the profile, one that maybe doesn't have the flex and robustness out of his spine and top rib as our class winners out here, but as you study him, again, he's working with a bit stouter bone, bigger footed kind of a calf is one that does need to be deepened out of his flank. He wants to shallow up a bit there, but
Your heavyweight dairy cross feeder champion, Brennan McCartney. Reserve champion, Lee Hepler. We will now do the dairy cross feeder grand drive. We've got Devin Berryhill, Emily McLean, and Brennan McCartney. We will also have the reserves come in. Rylan Weinbrenner, Brody McCartney, and Brennan McCartney.
well, please join me in congratulating all of your exhibitors out here in your crossbred division. Oh, come on, that's pathetic. You can do better than that. These are your kids. I think even though we're working with our crossbreds out here, I don't mind. I think there's an absolute space in the show ring for our crossbred cattle. They deserve our respect just as much as our quote-unquote purebred cattle out here. They certainly have a good section of our market space. As you get them and study the stock of these cattle, every week they just keep going higher and higher. You wonder when it's going to go and bottom out on us. Reading the reports, it looks like it's going to be another year and a half at these sustained prices, and every week they tend to hit a new record. And that's certainly something that we can appreciate when supply is low and demand is high. But we do need to certainly welcome our crossbred cattle into that market fold so that we can get that cattle supply up to meet demand and get prices a little bit more balanced. That being said, I think there's one out here that just combines the most amount of robustness, power, muscularity, smoothness of blending, correctness of frame, and one that's just a dead ringer in my eyes as to how he sorts out as your champion out here. And then we'll reevaluate with our reserve, and I'll get you my top four thereafter. I'll put the mic down. Let's give him another round of applause. Well done.
Your grand champion dairy cross feeders exhibited by Emily McLean.
Here I am standing, waiting for the reserve. Just so everybody knows, I am a natural blonde. This is artificial intelligence, okay? So bear with me at times out here. Again, reevaluating with our reserve from that particular class. I'll get you my favorites and how they sort out from reserve and fourth overall. Job well done again. Let's give them another round of applause. Good job.
Your reserve grand champion, Brennan McCartney. Third overall, Devin Berryhill. And fourth overall, Brennan McCartney. Class 14, dairy steer, featherweight. We have one entry, Mariah Hartman.
All right, so we're moving on to our dairy steers here, the featherweight dairy show. So technically, these are going to be judged as market ready. So we're not looking for growth and
Let's
performance.
give this young lady a hand. That's a real life lesson right there. Anytime they get away from you, just get back on the chain again, and that'll give you some resilience and durability in life, because boy, we'll need it in this big crazy world. Young lady's calf here, single entry, is one that, again, as you study him there, he's got a lot of frame. I like the point of shoulder that he's working with as you study him from the side. He's got a good length of forearm working it up. One that, again, like to stouten him up a bit, but he certainly has, for the frame that he's working with, a good amount of depth of center body. That proportionalizes him a little bit better, but is one that we just need to level him out of his top line, sink him down into that loin so he can be leveler out of his hip and really stride out more genuine and true. Again, let's give this young lady a hand. Well done.
Your champion featherweight dairy steers exhibited by Mariah Hartman. Class 15, lightweight dairy steers. Kellen Carnahan, Levi Brown, and Austin Willoughby.
So ideally, when we're talking about steers here, where they are ready to go to market, our market priorities are kind of muscle and finish, being fat, skeletal width, volume, their fleshing ability, meaning can they put on the meat? Is it where it needs to be? Structure, and then lastly, bounce, quality, built, kind of their design. So if you can tell with the feeders, structure is really important then. Now at the end point, since they are going to market, structure really moves down, because at this point we're going to butcher them, we're going to consume them. Let's make sure that that muscle and finish is where we want it. We want that width and volume so that we know we've got good internal meat with the rib eyes, things of that nature. And then structure kind of goes to the bottom then. So this is our lightweight dairy steer, class 15, weight ranging from 826 to 915.
Well, as we get started into our market show out here, we're working with some lighter weight calves that certainly aren't on they're on their journey, but they're not at their finish point. But this is where a Jersey might have an advantage in terms of their stoutness of frame. It is just characterized by their breed, so they're going to look a little more filled out at this stage in the game than maybe some of our framier Holsteins out here. And that being said, I think that reigns true out here in this lineup. The young man to lead us off is just, again, the smoothest, most robust calf of the lineup. He's the widest out of the point of his shoulders, most robust out of the top spread of his rib, a one that's got the most amount of dimension out of his lower rear stifle as you study him from behind. One thing, certainly we want to square him up out of his toe there. We need to get him deeper in that heel, square out of that toe. He's really got too much toe there as well. It's just starting to throw off the angle of his leg and how he moves as he continues to put on weight. That's only going to get amplified and worse. I'd say the same about the young man here in second. Just is a calf that doesn't quite have the depth and robustness of body as you get on top of him and beside him there. One that's not as maybe efficient in terms of how he's putting on the weight and feed conversion, needs a bit more time there to rival the smoothness of our class winner. The young man coming out here in third is just a rugged kind of calf, a little bit burly individual, really big-footed and stout-boned as you get studying from the surface there up, but is one that, again, is a bit overfilled for my liking in the show ring out here, one that's just not as deep, reads more coarse, he's tight out of his sternum, doesn't have flex to his spine, but one that's just smoother and deeper throughout. And then the young man to round out this class is one that's just really leaning into his dairy heritage out here, one that's just narrow as a blade, one that needs way more width, circumference of bone, depth of flank, one that needs to be more robust up top, one that, again, reads more feminine than masculine out here.
Your first in class was exhibited by Wyatt Brown. Second, Levi Brown. Third, Austin Willoughby. Fourth, Kellen Carnahan. We will now bring in class 16 lightweight dairy steers.
Here in our next class, the lightweight market calves, the young lady's jersey is a logical place for me to start out here. He rises to the challenge pretty naturally in my mind in terms of being having the advantage of stoutness in this particular lineup. One that's the smoothest made, the best balanced individual of the group proportional to the skeleton that he's working with. I like the length of arm that he's got and the point of elevation he has it out of that front 1/3. Is one that, again, is smoother out of his center body, more robust out of his center rib, and one that just has more squareness and dimension out of that rear hip as you study him from behind. One that, yes, we do need to get him deeper out of his flank, and I think that'd see him balance up even better. As we get into second and third, I think that's where it's a little bit tighter for me in terms of type and kind. I lean into the skeletal design of the third place calf, but for me, the second place calf out here has more right than the young man here in third, just as one that's smoother made. He's got more poundage on him. He's one that blends that shoulder into his forerib a bit better. One that, again, as you get your hands on him, there's just a bit more cover there. He's a lot of frame on that calf, so it's taken a lot of input to get him there. Might be a bit older of a calf to get him to that weight and that level of smoothness for where he's at, but he's still got quite a ways to go on his journey. Again, the young man here in third is one that I like the skeleton. I like the stoutness of bone, the circumference and density of bone that he's working with. He's one that reads a bit more masculine, the balance that he has nose to tail. But again, as you get your hands on him, there's just nothing there. We need to get more flesh on him. We need to get more cover on him. We need to pour the feed to him. He's stout enough made to where he certainly could pack on that poundage if we had the right diet on him. And then the young man to round out this class is one that his coloring doesn't help, but as you get past that, he's one that really shallows up out of his flank, is one that's the narrowest made out of his top line, certainly the most pinched out of his forerib, and is one that's just the narrowest out of his hip as well as he strides away from you.
Your Class 16 lightweight dairy steer champion is exhibited by Emily McLean. Reserve, Emily Scoville. Oh, I'm sorry. That was your first in class was Emily McLean. Second, Emily Scoville. Third, Kendra Carnahan. Fourth, Kendra Carnahan. We will now choose the champion and reserve. We've got Wyatt Brown, Emily McLean, Levi Brown, and Emily Scoville.
Let's go ahead and give these exhibitors a well-deserved round of applause in your lightweight division. As they get lined up here, for me, your champion is the one that just has the most robustness out of his center body. He's boldest out of his shoulder, has the most expressiveness out of his quarter, certainly the deepest individual of the class, and collects up really well and balances nicely nose to tail. Your reserve is going to be a calf that most neatly follows him in terms of type and kind, but we want to lay that tail head in a little bit better, strengthen him out of his loin, and he just needs more time and maturity to merit higher in this particular lineup. That being said, I'll get you my favorites. Let's give him another round of applause.
Your lightweight dairy steer champion is exhibited by Emily McLean. And your reserve, Wyatt Brown. We will now bring in Class 17 medium weight dairy steers. Brody McCartney, Rylan Weinbrenner, Brennan McCartney, and Micah Miller. If you would like to do Pee Wee showmanship, please come back to the back gate and sign up. That will happen after the regular showmanship contest. Pee Wee showmanship, please sign up out back. Would also like to thank our sponsor of the day once again, Indiana Farm Bureau agent Austin Tiernan. Visit him in the booth outside. There's also a drawing for a free cart, which would be very handy for a lot of 4-H families. Make sure you sign up. Austin has also sponsored the Grand Champion prizes for the kiddos for the contest today.
As we get them lined up here. Again, I think we've got cattle that have just been fed too much fiber from the get-go out here. From top to bottom, they're just leaning into not enough calories in their diet. As a general rule of thumb for these cattle, if we get too much fiber in them, we tend to get the height of frame that really amplifies from their breeding. So again, we want to limit that to about 3 to 5% of their diet max. Maybe about only half a pat of hay to a pat of hay a day is all they need to keep the bacteria pH balanced in their gut. From there, it needs to be calories. It needs to be energy. And again, probably about 11 to 12% protein max. Ones, again, that are between a 5 and 7% fat out of their diet as a general rule of thumb. That would get these cattle far further along than where they're at in this lineup. For me, the young man out here in first is the one that just neatly follows, is the most correct in this group in terms of his stoutness of frame. And again, for where he's at in his stoutness of frame, he should be further along. But he's the most dense-boned individual. He's the widest out of his chest floor, more open out of his forerib. He's the squarest out of his hip. One that just, again, is more squarely and widely made, more genuine in how he reads of a calf. Again, one that could be a lot better if we really pour the feed and calories to him. The young man here in second, I think, has done a fair job about doing that. He's got a calf that, again, is working with a lot of frame out here, one that we need to clean up in his front 1/3, but one that certainly has circumference of bone so he can carry the weight, but one we want to get in 3 to 4 inches shorter, one that we really need to pound the feed to spread that rib open so that we can really get a productive top line out of this calf. The young man here in third is one that, again, just a bit narrower made of an individual than those ahead of him there. One that I appreciate the density of bone, certainly in his forerib that he's working with. So, again, he can carry the weight. We just need to get him the weight. One that's squarer and leveler out of his hip than the calf behind him. And the young lady that rounds out this class is just the narrowest made. He's the tightest out of his forerib, tightest out of his chest floor as well. And as you get behind him, he's just the thinnest and flattest made individual in this group. We need to get him more poundage. He does have a good advantage, though, over some of the calves ahead of him being deeper bodied when you study him from the side, but one that just reads too feminine and too dairy for me.
Your Class 17 medium weight dairy steer, first, Brody McCartney. Second, Micah Miller. Third, third, Brennan McCartney. Fourth, Rylan Wine. We'll now bring our Class 18 medium weight dairy steer, Madison Scoville, Luke Scoville, and Brock McCartney.
Well, a very logical placing for me in this class and how they sort themselves pretty naturally in my mind. The young man to lead us off here is just, again, the stoutest made individual. We're starting to get somewhere here now in terms of our market show. We've got one that's got a fair amount of width out of his chest floor. He's fairly bold out of his shoulder, one that carries himself more open in his fore rib and down through his center body, one that, again, is more squarely made. Again, we'd like to reorganize and level his top line out a bit better. I think I'd see him tie up from a show ring appeal better, but he's certainly the most complete calf in this lineup. The young lady coming in second most neatly follows our class winner. In terms of levelness of top line, he certainly has the advantage there. He flexes out better with more freeness out of his sternum and loin and spine. One that, again, just reads a bit more narrowly made compared to our class winner. Doesn't quite have the boldness of chest floor that we're working with in that class winner. And the young man to round out this class is one that needs a chiropractor, and some might laugh at that, but we have a chiropractor on our cattle very regularly to make sure that they are freely moving, well aligned. We need to free that calf up out of his sternum. He's tight there, so think about it. When we are tight in our sternum, what happens to our back? That's when we start to see that roach. You free up that sternum, he's going to be able to level that back out and stride out more genuine and true. And really, for what he's working with, he is packing on a good amount of weight. He's got a lot of depth of body, certainly a lot of frame, so it's going to take him a lot of input to get to that ideal market weight of that calf, but is one that needs some skeletal correctness from a chiropractic standpoint.
Class 18 medium weight dairy steer, first Brock McCartney, second Madison Scoville, third Luke Scoville. We will now bring in the medium weight dairy steers to pick your champion and reserve. Brody McCartney, Brock McCartney, Micah Miller, and Madison Scoville.
So the judge there talked about a chiropractor, and he is right. That is very real. There are livestock chiropractors. They primarily, you'll find them for horses, just because horses are more athletic. Long term, they can get issues. But we do use them on cattle and occasionally sheep and goats. Normally on the smaller species, we'll use something called MagnaWave, which is a low impulse to kind of start to loosen up those muscles, like a TENS unit in a sense that we'd put on a person. But it's a low magnetic impulse wave that'll kind of free up maybe some tense muscles.
Please join me in congratulating your exhibitors out here in your medium weight market drive. Well, talking them in their class, I think they stand out pretty naturally in my mind of where they sort out in this lineup. Our two first places from their respective classes certainly pair up beautifully in this lineup, so I make no mystery or guise about it. It's between those two out here. But for me, there's one that's more robust and bold out of his chest and center rib as well. He's a really powerful individual as you compare him up to those beside him on either end of him out here. One that has a bit more throughout his center body. He's got more depth of body as you study him from the side. He's leveler out of his flank, and one that just has more expressiveness and dimension that he's beginning to work with. Again, we're nowhere near ideal market weight for this framework of cattle. I don't necessarily prescribe to there is a single weight range that is ideal for these cattle. It really is proportionalized to what their skeleton can handle. With these cattle in the frame that we're working with here, we certainly need quite a bit more poundage to get to that space. So they're just on their journey. So I'm keeping that and giving them some grace when it comes to how I'm evaluating them, not just where they stand today, but where will they likely be when they end up on the rail. That being said, I'll go out and get you my favorites out here and how they sort. Let's give them another round of applause.
Your medium weight dairy feeder champion is Brock McCartney. Reserve is Brody McCartney.
And when they look alike, it's really hard.
I get them all mixed up. I called the littlest one, I think, Brock or Brett.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry. We're just trying to keep it straight on our end as we put the official results in that we submit to the fair office, just making sure these siblings get the right equal rights on who beat who so that none of us get in trouble. But we'll leave that up to mom and dad on figuring that out and sorting that.
We have Class 19 heavyweight dairy steers coming into the ring. Natalie Dunn, Bridget Dunn, and Kendall Kresher.
Class 19. These are going to weight range from 1,446 pounds to 1,572 pounds. Just a thank you to some of our sponsors here today who made sure that this was successful and that all these kids got banners, ribbons. I'm going to read off some of the sponsors who supported that. And if you'd like to sponsor any class or get involved, you can contact the 4-H office, the extension office here in DeKalb County. You can donate as little as $5 to $25 or even more to sponsor a ribbon or a banner, anything of that nature. So J&S Harrison Farms, Hannah and Ori Foster, Credit Wealth Management, John and Sue Stoops, Weller Farms, Larry and Teresa Springer, Kimmel Farms, Larry and Deb Kimmel, Myra Maldini and Cecile Freeburn, Cassie and Jason Brown, Richard Coomer, Superior Dairy Farm, Maniacs Mulch and More, Slaughter Lawn and Landscape, Hartman Farm to Table, Northeastern Realty Group, Healing Hands Massage by Faith, Hartman Farm to Table, Dennis Zeisloff Family, Jeff and Cindy Campbell, Raymond and Pat Malcolm and Families, DeKalb County Extension Homemakers, Lockwood Welding, Brian and Stephanie Clifford and Family, DeKalb Farm Mutual, K&D Carnahan Farms, Pearson Property Management, Jerry and Meredith Store Family, Custer Ag Supply, Auburn Alterations, and Spencerville Eastern Star Donut Trailer.
Here, you know they're tall when me 6'2", 6'3" on a heel. I got to go up. We really want to get them stouter made, and I challenge the families out there to really study what our champion feeder calf was. Stout relative to his body, the composition, the balance, the levelness, the muscle expression that calf had. He could look exactly like that at 1,525 pounds if fed and worked well. And I challenge the families out there to really select for that type of cattle out here. That's what we find really competitive on not just a county fair level, but on a market perspective, a jackpot perspective, as well as the state level. That's what is really competitive out here. And we don't want to make these kids, poor kids, have to keep their arm up like this just to keep a head up. They really should be keeping it natural out here. So with that being said, they're all a bit too tall in my mind and how they frame up, but that's what we're working with out here. The one that does the most correct for me is the young lady's red cap. In terms of how he balances out nose to tail, he's levelest out of his top line, levelest out of his hip from the profile. He's squarest made out of his hip as you get behind him there. One that doesn't have the weight that you need for his frame. He's got quite a bit of time to go. That's going to be more expensive, Mom and Dad. That's why, again, we like those stouter made calves. You get a little bit cheaper feed bill that way because they can really convert that weight to width versus trying to fill in a tall frame. Us tall people have it a little easier. I can weigh more than some people and still look thin. Same with cattle. Young lady here in second is one that I like the circumference of bone that he's working with. Certainly in the front 1/3 of his body, he can handle the weight. He's going to need it at his frame and at his size, but one that just gives out a lot of gas as you get behind him. He's thin out of his thigh, doesn't quite have the squareness out of his hip as I'd like to see of our class winner. And again, just one that doesn't have the width over his top line to merit higher than our class winner out here. And then we've got a unique oddball in this particular group, not because of breed or coloring or anything like that. He's one that's got a lot of frame, but he's got the bone density to carry it, but then he's got some skeletal correctness that we need to work up over that spine. One that, again, needs to really be able to free himself up. But then as you study him walk behind, he has way too much narrowness there. He even knocks his hooves from time to time. You can hear them click together. We need a calf that's more genuine and true, wider at his base, and carrying that width all the way up from his frame.
Your Class 19 heavyweight dairy steer winner, Bridget Dunn. Second place, Natalie Dunn. Third, Kendall Crusher. We will now bring in Class 20 heavyweight dairy steers. Paige Crusher, Devin Berryhill, and Leah Crusher.
Just to continue on those sponsors, J&L Brown Excavating, Weller Electric, John Scoville Family, Hind Farms, Braylon Laser Services, Garrett State Bank, in memory of Don Van Wy, Bill Van Wy and family, Brand Dairy Farm, Yard Veterinary Services with Kyle Yard and Callie Knott. I'll just tell you that's who we use. They are fantastic. Kyle, over Christmas break, he was busy with his family on a Christmas train and helped me work through an animal. I'm so grateful for them. Also, Premier Fencing, Mr. Ryan Miller. I've had experience with him as well. Fantastic job putting up our goat pasture. He even did my sister's fencing for around her pool. Again, all of these sponsors, we wouldn't be able to have this county fair to be able to give all of these exhibitors and these kids with their projects the ribbons, banners, and prizes without them. So again, if you'd like to donate to be part of it and to sponsor a banner, get a hold of the DeKalb County 4-H Extension Office. They usually start in March putting together who wants to sponsor what. Again, you could do it as little as $5, $20, $25, all the way up to $30 to sponsor a Grand Champion banner. So that would be much appreciated.
Well, we're certainly up there in weight, and we need to be relative to the frame that we're working with these cattle. For me, the one that's certainly at his ideal point for where he's at is the young lady's dark calf to lead us off here. One that just reads a lot of product and marketability about him while still remaining fresh enough to get on the move. He's not got his pins popped out. He is getting a bit cresty there as you study him at that front 1/3, but is one that carries himself well. Good angle to his shoulder, blends well into the most open forerib. He's the widest up top. and he's the furthest along in his journey. He's a calf that's taken a lot of poundage, a lot of feed, and a lot of input to get to this point, but they've kept him fresh and kept it and done a nice job about it. In terms of freshness, we certainly still have that in the young lady here in second. One that's just kind of a limousine length of a calf. There's just profile for days, and I appreciate that. I like the length of loin that he's working with from that 13th rib there back. He's level out of his top line. He's good elevated out of the point of his forearm. One that just isn't as far along in his journey as our class winner out here. One that's maybe outpowered from that class winner. We'd like to see him a little bit wider and more expressive and square out of his hip as he strides away from you, but certainly one that reads very genuine and true and fresh as he gets on the move. And then the young man's calf to round out this particular class. He's past his point just a little bit there. We've got our pins popped. We've got our brisket dropped. Is one that just needs to read more fresh. Should have went on the truck a few weeks ago. Is one that, again, just reads more stiff, more stale. Doesn't quite get around the ring with as much comfort and athleticism, but he certainly has the advantage of depth of frame as you study him from the side than any calf in the class. Just one that reads more coarse, not as fresh as some of those others.
Your Class 20 heavyweight dairy steer. First place, Leah Crusher. Second, Paige Crusher. And third place, Devin Berryhill. We will now bring in our first and second places for our heavyweight dairy steer champion and reserve. We've got Bridget Dunn, Leah Crusher, Natalie Dunn, and Paige Crusher. Just a show bill update. There will be junior showmanship after intermediate. It is just not in the show bill. So we will do junior showmanship. And then premier. And then peewee.
And then.
Well, join me in celebrating all of your exhibitors out here in your heavyweight market drive. Again, we're working with quite a bit of frame out here, and just as a point of reference out here, between our two class winners, there's a little over 250 pounds between them. So again, we've got quite a bit of spread with cattle that all have a bit of frame, but again, you can study each of these individuals and see the freshness that we're working with as comparatively to some others out here. Again, I think the one to win is a pretty natural selection in my mind in terms of just his power and strength, but still combining it with a good amount of freshness relative to his frame that he's working with. Like I said, I don't prescribe to there being an ideal market weight. It is relative to the frame that the calf is having and working with, but it's more about the input cost that you want to have as a producer and as a family. These taller frame calves take quite a bit more input and cost and time on feed. They're not as efficient in their overall makeup than some of our stouter made individuals out here. That being said, it's a bit tighter in terms of reserve. I think there's one that most neatly follows the type and kind of our class, of our champion out here. Reed's a bit fresh, not as wide and as square as our champion. Maybe he's one that, again, just reads really fresh, still got some time to go. Maybe he's not at his ideal market weight for his frame size, but most neatly follows the type and kind of our champion. That being said, I'll get you my favorites and LA sort out for me. Let's give him another round of applause.
Your heavyweight dairy steer champion is exhibited by Leah Crusher. And your reserve is exhibited by Paige Crusher.
Looking forward to having her. That's good. I got to confirm with her mom that she knows she signed up still. Most kids tell their parents, but you would be surprised that kids who sign up for things, they don't tell their parents. So I always try to make sure to confirm with the parents.
We will now do the Dairy Steer Grand Drive.
All right, here we go.
We will bring all of our champions in first. Featherweight dairy steer, exhibited by Mariah Hartman. Lightweight dairy steer, exhibited by Emily McLean. Medium weight dairy steer, exhibited by Brock McCartney. And heavyweight dairy steer, exhibited by Leah Crusher.
I should make a plug for the livestock judging team. If you have a child who's interested in being on the Eastside FFA livestock judging team, message on Facebook the Eastside FFA page, and we'll get in contact with you. 7th grade to senior, and for us, you have to be a student at Eastside High School.
Once again, I would like to introduce your 2025 Miss DeKalb County, Claire Woodcock. She's helping us today pass out some banners and ribbons. So thank you, Claire.
I do not believe that Garrett and DeKalb have livestock judging teams, but I'm sure if you pester those ag teachers enough, they might start one up. A lot of our ag teachers have multiple competitions, multiple things going on. Again, I am not a teacher at Eastside. I am just a volunteer who helps because, well, there's only so much time in a day that a teacher can do, and we're able to make it work at Eastside. So, again, if you're an Eastside student interested in being on the livestock judging team in grades 7 through 12, hit us up on Facebook, on Eastside FFA on Messenger, and we'll get you some information. All right, we're going to do the Grand Champion Dairy Steer along with Reserve Grand 3rd overall and 4th overall. Once the champion is picked, we'll pull in a reserve just to save space in the ring because our ring can't support all 8 calves out here. So you'll see once a champion is selected, we'll fill in with the reserve.
Well, please join me in celebrating all of your exhibitors out here in your Market Grand Drive. Well, we certainly have a variety out here, and that's what we've been given, so that's what we're working with in terms of type and kind and where they are, but respectfully from each of their divisions where they stood, I think they certainly deserve the time out here on the shavings that they're getting. I've talked them in their class, and so I won't spend too much time on that, but as we mentioned in our feeder calf division out here, there really is a shortage of supply of cattle, and we're about 1.5 to 2.5 years from meeting that supply demand that we're working with. So unfortunately, we're going to be working with these cattle prices that we have. It's good as a producer, it's good as a seller, not always the best as a buyer. And again, we still want to promote the quality that we produced here in America. We want to promote people to eat beef over other alternatives, and that's certainly something that these cattle do well. Like I mentioned, 25% of all of our consumed beef in America are from these cattle produced all over the country, and that's certainly something to be proud of. You have the lion's share of the market out here, and is one that we continue to see breeders select for, starting to cross into our beef and dairy mixes there. We're getting really good dollars per pound out of those crosses. But even the genuine and true purebred cattle out here can certainly still hang very well on the rail between that high choice to medium prime quality grade out there with about a yield grade of 2 that we're working with on these cattle when they hang. So it's a very essential market segment of our market here in the beef supply that these cattle, so we need to continue to encourage these kids to feed and represent this breed and this project. It's really critical that we keep this project alive. Without this project, your prices would be even higher. We would not be able to meet the demand that we have at all, and they're really saving the beef cattle industry right now as we see it. That being said, your champion out here is one that just, again, reads very genuine and true, proportional to his skeleton. He's the furthest along and very ideally finished for his frame and type and kind, while still remaining fresh and robust, hydrated down his top line, one that flexes out beautifully when he gets set into motion, one that's just really rugged and powerful, very masculine in his overall makeup. And then it gets pretty tight for your reserve in terms of the type and kind, but for me, there's one out here that just proportional to his skeleton is more correct, more balanced, leveler out of his top line, and one that's smoother made proportionally to where he's at with his frame. So that being said, I'll get you my favorites from grand through fourth. Let's give another well-deserved round of applause.
Your grand champion dairy steers exhibited by Leah Crusher. We will now bring in Paige Crusher.
So now we'll bring in the reserve champion heavyweight steer.
Your reserve grand champion is exhibited by Emily McLean. We will now bring in Wyatt Brown.
The judge is doing now is just confirming kind of how much finish is on him. He's going to take his hand. It's going to be closed. He's going to use the, not his fingertips, but the middle of his hand, and he's feeling for how much fat's there. Seeing how much cover we got on those things. Are they adequate for the yield grade we're looking for?
Your third overall is exhibited by Paige Crusher. And your fourth overall is exhibited by Brody McCartney. Brock McCartney, sorry.
We should just say B. McCartney.
There you go. B. McCartney. There you go. All right. Now we will move into our dairy cross steers. We have 3 classes of those: lightweight, medium, and heavy.
I'd like to give a quick shout out to our sponsor of the day, Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance Agent Austin Tiernan, who also supplied our grand champion prizes up here. Visit him outside the door for some sign-ups and some free goodies.
Another shout out when Leighton gets here. Allen Feeds, they bring a giant school bus. They retrofitted into a small show supply. It's not small, it's large. It's a school bus. Show supply vehicle. And they donate 10% of all proceeds they sell back to the 4-H
We will now bring
club.
in your dairy cross steers. Class 21, lightweight dairy cross steer, exhibited by Devin Berryhill.
So thank you, Allen Feeds, for doing that. That 10% helps us out on the grounds and be able to make improvements out here. If anybody's been to the fairgrounds this year, where we usually set up chutes out there on the east side, they took some crushed pavement and made it so nice where it's level, it drains, it's not a muddy mess after the rain. Because if you want to end a drought, just have the DeKalb County Fair. Or if you want to drought, have the DeKalb County Fair. Because you never know what kind of weather you're going to get. When I showed back in the early 2000s one year, we had snow. So big thank you to the grounds group here with the 4-H Council making those improvements. It does not go unnoticed, and it's very
crossbred
grateful.
division out here, lightweight cross, single entry. The young man is obviously going to go ahead and be our champion, but talking him as an individual out here, as a calf that's nice and level out of his top line. He's square out of his hip. He's got one that's got a good amount of expressiveness and dimension out of his rear quarter, as kind of a big-ended type of a calf. One that you like the angle of his shoulder and how he lays that into this body wall there. One that maybe we need to clean up his front 1/3, tighten up that neck, and get him a little bit more cleanly. I think that'd seem even more competitive. Job well done by this young man.
Your lightweight dairy cross steer champion, Devin Berryhill. We will now bring in class 22 medium weight dairy cross steer, Eli Patty.
Eli's got some tough competition out here today. Let's see if he can pull through and get a big W out here for the medium weight dairy cross champion.
In our medium weight division out here, we've got a calf that, as you study him from the side, he's got a good amount of length of body. I appreciate that from his length of loin. One that reads more tight out of his forerib and from that shoulder there back. One that we need to smooth up a little bit there, and how he blends that shoulder blade into his body wall. Open him up a bit more in that forerib as well. Would see him balance out and smooth out a little bit better. If we square him up in his toe as well, that get him to place that weight a little bit more correctly and soundly as he gets around the ring. But one that's got a fair amount of expressiveness in his rear quarter. As you get behind him, he's fairly square from the point of his hip down to his hock. One, again, that just reads more tight-fronted, a little bit more A-framed as you get on top of him as well. Let's give this young man a round of applause.
Your class 22 medium weight dairy cross champion, Eli Patty. We will now bring in class 23 heavyweight dairy cross steers. We have 2 entries in this class, Brock McCartney and Luke Berryhill.
So in that last class, kind of like we talked about really early on in the show, you talked about the A-frame look we're looking at. Think of a bluegill versus a catfish, right? When you get to the point of that shoulder, he's a little too steep, and we want that nice and round like a catfish, right? So when you look at that bluegill, he just doesn't carry that meat all the way through on his ribs, and then also he doesn't have as much room for lung capacity and his heart. So we just want to crack that open a little bit. Another thing I teach our kids is, you know, we kind of want a 5-gallon bucket in a sense. When you look at a 5-gallon bucket, nice, big, round, bold rib shape, that's really what we're looking for in any species of animal in that rib shape.
Well, here in our heavyweight cross division out here, we've got quite a bit of similarities, but also quite a bit of differences between these two cattle. For me, the young man's big-footed, stout bone, really robust rugged kind of a calf, is going to go ahead and lead us off. Really powerful, and that's what he has the advantage of out here, is just the power that he brings out of his shoulder and chest floor. He is more open into his fore rib. He's bolder out of his center body. One that, again, just reads very genuine and true. He can carry quite a bit of weight with that circumference of bone that he's working with, and he still maintains a level of freshness as he strides out. He finds that front hoof print and walks very correct and in line with his skeletal design as he strides away from you. That doesn't take away from the young man here in second as your reserve, one that's very clean and feminine throughout in his front 1/3, but one that we just need to give him a little bit more power. He's more narrowly made of an individual, but balances out beautifully from nose to tail as you study him at the profile. Just one that, again, a little less circumference of bone, a little more narrowly made, one that just doesn't quite have the power and robustness, but I love the balance of frame that we're working with from his underline all the way up to the surface of his top line. Calf, again, that's just outpowered in this particular go-around, but a very structurally correct calf to lead us off in second there. Well done.
Your Class 23 heavyweight dairy cross champion, Luke Berryhill, and reserve, Brock McCartney. We will go ahead and bring the dairy cross steers in for your grand drive. Devin Berryhill, Eli Patty, and Luke Berryhill.
As we get them lined up here, let's have a well-deserved round of applause for our crossbred grand drive. Again, out here, we're picking our top 4, but our champion, our grand champion crossbred out here is just one, again, that's really robust, really powerful, big-footed, stout bone, long-bodied, well-balanced as you get him from the profile up. Really like how he gets around the ring, still fresh and hydrated down his top line, good amount of flex out of his spine as well. Just a really strong, powerful calf to lead us off. And from there, I'll get you my favorites and how I sort this particular lineup up from there. Let's give him another well-deserved round of applause.
Your champion dairy cross is exhibited by Luke Berryhill. Reserve, Brock McCartney. Third, Devin Berryhill. And fourth, Eli Patty.